Israel is at war. The situation is grave. This morning, Hamas launched thousands of missiles at Israel. Now, both sides are trading fire. Israeli soldiers are fighting terrorists on the streets of southern Israel. The bodies are piling up on both sides. Israel is reporting at least 70 deaths. Airstrikes in Gaza have killed nearly 200 people. Prime Minister Netanyahu has declared a state of war. The conflict will escalate in the days ahead. The entire West Asian region will witness the fallout. There's a lot on the line for all parties involved. How will this war shape Netanyahu's political future? What happens to his bid for normalization with Saudi Arabia? And what about the Indians who are stuck in Israel? Why is Hamas attacking Israel now? What will happen to the Palestinians? And where do major powers like the US, Europe and Russia stand in this fight? What has India said about the Hamas attacks today? Tonight on this special edition of Vantage, we'll bring you a 360-degree perspective of this war in West Asia.
ها هي حصونهم.
We are at war and we will win it.
Israel is at war. It has come under terrorist attacks. At least 70 Israelis have been killed, more than 700 have been injured. The scale of it is being called unprecedented. The images are terrifying. Israel is fighting back. It says the enemy will pay a price, the type of which it has never known. This is war and it is massive. The hostility is decades old, but the latest provocation came this morning. Hamas invaded Israel. It was a surprise attack. No one saw it coming. Thousands of missiles rained on Israel. Hamas entered Israeli territory, killed people and took hostages. Through the day, we've been receiving pictures. They're chilling and deeply unsettling. But this is a story that must be told. So we advise viewer discretion. We start with how it began this morning. Take a look at this. At 7 a.m. local time, thousands of rockets were fired on Israel. We don't have the exact figure, but there are multiple reports. Hamas says it launched over 5,000 rockets. Israel says 2,500. Another report says more than 7,000 rockets were fired. Whatever the number, the scale is immense. Israel is facing its biggest attack in decades. The rockets fell far and wide, some all the way to northern Israel towards Tel Aviv. These attacks activated the sirens. Israeli citizens were alerted. They were under attack. Soon the attackers released a video message. It featured a Hamas spokesperson. You cannot see the face. It has the silhouette of a man, and he announced an operation against Israel.
We have decided to put an end to Israel's defenses with God's help, so the enemy understands that the time of wreaking without being held accountable is over. We announced the start of Al-Aqsa flood operation.
The Al-Aqsa flood operation, that's the name of this Hamas operation, of the series of attacks that they've launched. And it was a well-coordinated operation. Soon after the message, Hamas kicked off their ground assault, where terrorists invaded Israel from all directions, on land, sea and air. Yes, there were paragliders in the air and boats charging towards Israeli beaches. it was truly unprecedented. There was no skirmish on the border, a limited ground offensive. It was none of these things. It was an all-out attack. Hamas was on the streets of Israel. They were seen driving around in jeeps, charging at their targets. The focus of the ground assault was southern Israel. They destroyed border fences using bulldozers, and Hamas had guns here. The Israeli forces were clearly caught off guard. This is the Israel-Gaza border, and here the Hamas captured a tank. They were seen celebrating.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الجند ناصر طلعوا
لله الحمد ها هي حصونهم.
As the day progressed, they captured more military assets like vehicles. They even infiltrated into military bases. As of this evening, fighting was underway in at least 6 locations. Reports say the Hamas tried to break into homes. Israel's police chief said there were 21 active scenes. And this shows the extent of the attack, 21 active scenes. As the reports poured in, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called an emergency meeting, and then he made an announcement. He said, Israel is at war. It's not an operation, not an escalation. This is war, he said.
Citizens of Israel, we are at war, not an operation, not an escalation, a war. I ordered an extensive reserve mobilization and a retaliatory war with a strength and scope that the enemy had never known. The enemy will pay a price he has never known.
לטהר את היישובים מהמחבלים שחדרו פנימה, הפעולה הזאת מתבצעת בשעות הללו.
So Netanyahu has vowed revenge. Israel is striking back, but the response will be complicated. That's because they still don't have full control of Israeli territory. Fighting is underway on the streets. Israeli troops are clashing with the Hamas. Villages and towns on the border have been captured by terrorists. People have been taken hostage. Hamas says it has taken Israelis hostage. How many? More than 50 as per some unconfirmed reports. And there are disturbing videos online. They show Israeli citizens being rounded up, both civilians and soldiers. Some have been taken to Gaza. This is territory controlled by Hamas. Other hostages are being held inside their homes. And again, let me warn you, the pictures are disturbing. That was an Israeli soldier. He was captured on the Gaza border. Many more videos like these are circulating. And they're fueling anger and calls for retaliation. Israel is not known to take such provocations lying down. It has launched a counter-offensive already. They're calling it Operation Iron Swords. And this is not just a military response. Expect Israel to strike deep inside Gaza and also target the top leaders of Hamas. There is talk of deploying troops to Gaza, but no official confirmation yet. Today, Israel conducted airstrikes. Israeli warplanes flew to Gaza. They conducted strikes at multiple locations, and Israel plans to ramp up these operations. They held a cabinet meeting earlier in the day, chaired by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he has set out 3 goals for his military. Clear out the terrorists, impose a vast cost, that's the term he used, impose a vast cost on the enemy, and fortify other areas. Israel's defense minister says they will win at any cost.
Hamas made a grave mistake this morning. I call civilians to abide instructions and follow them to the letter. The state of Israel will win this war.
On the other side, Palestinian families are fleeing Gaza. They expect more violence. The death toll is mounting. Both sides have reported casualties. Hundreds of people are hurt. But this is just the beginning of the conflict. Expect the casualty count to rise. So that's the latest on the conflict. Now let's talk about the key players. What's at stake for them? And we're starting with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. He's been tested, and he will be tested in the coming days. His focus right now is on flushing out the terrorists. Earlier today, he spelled out what he wants. Nothing less than a win will suffice for Netanyahu at this point.
We are at war, In war, one needs to be level-headed. I call on all citizens of Israel to unite in order to achieve our highest goal, that is victory in the war.
היעד השני במקביל.
Netanyahu is calling for unity here, and his call is getting traction. His political opponents and his rivals back him. Politicians from across party lines in Israel have issued statements of support. We've often told you about the fractured nature of Israeli politics. This country has seen 5 elections in 4 years. And in recent weeks, Israel seemed to be edging towards calling a 6th election. Netanyahu leads a precarious coalition. He's been dealing with internal divisions. His grip on power was being tested. First, by the backlash against judicial reform, and now by members of his cabinet. 4 days ago, he met with his national security minister. His name is Itamar Ben-Gvir. There were reports of a rift. Apparently, Ben-Gvir was unhappy. He was not invited for a key cabinet meeting. And what was discussed at this meeting? Iran, Israel's main rival and its biggest security concern. Now, Ben-Gvir's associates were taking aim at Prime Minister Netanyahu. They said the minister was snubbed intentionally. The winter session of the Knesset was coming up. The Knesset is Israel's parliament. The session was scheduled to begin from the 14th of October, so in about a week from now. And there were concerns. Could Netanyahu bank on Ben-Gvir for votes? So it was a politically fraught situation in Israel. But after today's attacks, all that speculation has evaporated. The political battles must take a back seat because Israel is at war. Netanyahu is on firmer footing, but he cannot fight this battle alone. The military is already on the streets. Reserves are being called up. What about the intelligence? On this front, the Prime Minister has been let down. His spy agency is the legendary Mossad. They're in hot water this time. Israel's borders have been breached. Barbed wires were taken apart. Rockets were flying in the air. There were terrorists on the streets. They're attacking military installations and taking hostages. Israel's defenses have been breached, and it seems Mossad had no clue that this was coming. Critics are calling this a massive intelligence failure. Tel Aviv has ordered an investigation, but don't expect answers anytime soon because officials say it could take years. So Israeli intelligence has some catching up to do. But Netanyahu's international allies are ready to step up. Through the day, they've issued statements of support. We begin with the United States of America. It has condemned the attack and promised support to Tel Aviv. A short while back, Netanyahu spoke with Joe Biden. The US president assured support to Israel. He said Washington stands behind Tel Aviv and supports its right to defend itself. What did Netanyahu tell US President Biden? Israel's military campaign will be prolonged and intense, and America seems ready to support that. The US Defense Secretary has also spoken. His name is Lloyd Austin. Austin is promising military supplies to Israel. He says Israel will have whatever it needs to defend itself. Now, besides the US, we've seen statements from various other countries, the United Kingdom, Netherlands, France, Egypt, Turkey, and the European Union. They've all condemned the attack. Russia, too, has called for restraint. Moscow says it is speaking to the Palestinians. And so is Egypt. Now, Egypt is an important regional player. In the past, Egypt has mediated in this conflict. Egypt has brokered ceasefires. The latest one was last year in the month of August. Israel had conducted airstrikes in Gaza. It had killed 49 people. Egypt had then intervened to end hostilities. And it might be looking to mediate this time too. Egypt's foreign ministry issued a statement today. It said Egypt is making, quote unquote, intensive contacts at all levels. But this time, brokering a truce might not be that easy. Iran has come out in support of Hamas. It has backed the attack on Israel. Iran has backed this attack. Iranian lawmakers met today at the parliament in Tehran, and they chanted slogans like "Death to Israel." So the battle lines have been drawn. Netanyahu has strong support both at home and overseas. But a combative Hamas and an antagonistic Iran will certainly test his patience. As pictures from Israel circulated on social media and news reports detailed the horror unfolding there, reactions started coming in. And all of them said the same thing. It's unprecedented and it must stop now. India too has condemned this incident. Prime Minister Narendra Modi tweeted about it. He called it what it was, a terror attack on the state of Israel. In fact, let me quote from the full post by the Indian Prime Minister. And this is what he said. Deeply shocked by the news of terrorist attacks in Israel, our thoughts and prayers are with the innocent victims and their families. We stand in solidarity with Israel at this difficult hour. Now, his choice of words is telling. In the past, India has not called Hamas a terrorist organization. The official term used to describe this group is militants. So for the Prime Minister to call it a terrorist attack is a marked shift and a long overdue one, we say. It is in line with his policy of dehyphenating Israel and Palestine and deepening relations with Israel. Mr. Modi is the first Indian Prime Minister to have ever visited Israel. Ever. No Indian Prime Minister before him visited the country. He did it in 2017. It cemented a very important relationship for New Delhi. And today, as Israel fights back, it's important to dwell on this story too. This partnership between India and Israel is not traditional. India first recognized Israel in 1950, but they established diplomatic ties only in 1992. Israel supported India during wars, but Indian leaders were wary of openly recognizing this. The fear was that friendship with Israel will alienate Palestine and this will upset the Muslim world and India's Muslim population. Well, those fears were unfounded. In the last few years, India and Israel have emerged as close partners. Bilateral trade crossed $7.5 billion last year. 30 years back, it was some $200 million. Today, India is Israel's seventh largest trading partner. Israel is India's third largest defense supplier. This relationship is dominated by 3 Ds: defense, diamonds, and drip irrigation. They're strategic partners and members of groupings like the I2U2. That's India, Israel, the United States, and the UAE. So I2U2, also known as the West Asian Quad. So there's a lot of cooperation and trade, but any bilateral relationship is nothing without the people. And that's also the crux of India-Israel ties. In fact, a Pew survey talks about this. It says that Israelis rate India more favorably than any other country. More than 70% Israelis view India favorably. And the sentiment is mutual. The kind of support Israel enjoys in India is a story in itself, which brings us to Indians living in Israel. There are about 18,000 Indian citizens in Israel. Most of them are caregivers. They're employed by aging Israelis to take care of them. Then there are diamond traders, IT professionals, and students. So it's a small but a significant diaspora. The current war has raised questions about their safety. The Indian Foreign Ministry has issued an advisory. It has asked Indians in Israel to stay vigilant, to avoid unnecessary movement, to stay close to safety shelters, and to exercise caution. There is no talk of an evacuation yet. No one knows what the next few days will look like or how Israel will retaliate. So no evacuation yet. But if it comes to that, India has experience in this region. In 2006, there was a war between Israel and Lebanon. India evacuated 2,300 people then. Not just Indians, but also citizens from Nepal and Sri Lanka. It hasn't come down to that yet. But if it does, India will prioritize the safety of its citizens. We did it in Kuwait. We did it in Ukraine. We did it in Sudan. And if push comes to shove, we'll do it in Israel. Now let's tell you about the group that started this, Hamas. Who or what is the Hamas? It's a terrorist organization, but it calls itself a political party. It is, in fact, one of the 2 largest political parties in Palestine. Now, Palestine is divided into 2 parts, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The West Bank is controlled by a coalition called the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, led by a party called Fatah. So the PLO rules the West Bank. And the Gaza Strip is controlled by Hamas. This group is ideologically and politically motivated. It rules a population of more than 2 million Palestinians. And it calls itself the face of the Palestinian movement. Hamas gets its name from an Arab acronym, Harkat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyah, which translates to the Islamic Resistance Movement. Now, this group was founded by a man called Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, a Palestinian scholar and cleric. In 1967, there was a 6-day war. Israel won, and they took over Palestinian territory. 2 decades later, Yassin established Hamas, and Palestinians rose against Israel's occupation. The year was 1987. The movement was called the First Intifada, or the First Uprising. There was a series of violent protests, attacks targeting Jews in Israel. 1 year later, Hamas published their charter. It called for the destruction of Israel and for the establishment of an Islamic society in historic Palestine. And then Hamas continued the attacks. They reportedly resorted to suicide bombings, rocket attacks, and small arms attacks. Their targets were civilians. The international community designated Hamas as a terrorist group. Over the years, it tried to morph itself into a political party, but it kept a military wing, a political party with a military wing. That's what they called themselves. And this wing was to carry out attacks against Israel. Hamas created a top-down government approach. At the top was the Politburo, a 15-member body which operates in exile. Then comes the Shura Council. Its members are unknown, but this council elects the Politburo. It also oversees some welfare programs in the West Bank and Gaza. And then there is the Hamas government. It implements policies and agendas set by the Shura Council. But it's more like a puppet government. So does the Hamas have a representative face? Well, it does, and it's this man, Ismail Haniyeh. He's the designated chairman of Hamas, and guess where he operates from? Qatar's capital, Doha. Hamas leaders have made Qatar their workplace because they had a falling out with their previous hosts. That's Syria. Which brings us to another question. Who supports and funds Hamas on the geopolitical level? Where do they get their money and weapons from? Qatar is clearly an outright supporter. Apart from hosting the leaders of Hamas, Qatar sends millions of dollars to the terror group. In 2021, the Qatari government announced aid worth $360 million for Hamas. That's $360 million that Hamas has never given accountability for. Where did that money go? Next in line is Turkey. Their President Erdogan is a stalwart supporter of this terror organization. Hamas even has offices in Istanbul. In the month of July, Erdogan hosted the chief of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in Ankara. Erdogan openly supports the Palestinian cause, and Turkey has repeatedly sent funds to Hamas. And even now, after today's attacks, Erdogan does not condemn them for what they've done. Listen to this.
As Turkey, in the light of the events that have occurred in Israel this morning, we call on all sides to act with restraint, to stay away from impulsive moves that will heighten the tension further.
So Erdogan is calling on all sides to act with restraint. No mention of how Hamas escalated hostilities and how they put thousands of civilian lives in danger. Despite Erdogan's open embrace of Hamas, he is not their top supporter. That title goes to Iran. Tehran provides Hamas with funds, weapons, and military training. It is common for Hamas leaders to meet Iranian leaders and clerics. According to a report by the US State Department, Iran provides almost $100 million every year to Hamas. What about the weapons? There's no clarity on how many they give or what kind, but here's what the Hamas chief says. Iran is their biggest donor of weapons. The Hamas leadership often visits Iran to plot against their common enemy, Israel. And they insist that this is not a proxy war, that they're not fighting on behalf of Iran, but they haven't found many takers. Over the years, American sanctions have forced Iran to cut funding to Hamas, but their relationship remains intact. So for Iran, Hamas is an ally. For Israel, it's a terror group. But how do the people of Palestine see Hamas? A poll was held in the month of June by the Palestinian Center for Policy Research, and they revealed some shocking numbers. Only 31% of the people in Palestine say that Hamas should represent them. A whopping 73% Palestinians believe that Hamas should not represent them. 73%. They say there's widespread corruption in Gaza and institutions run by Hamas. The poll also asked Palestinians another question. Who would they vote for if elections were to be held today? 56% picked the current Hamas chief, Ismail Haniyeh. And that's a clear majority, 56%. So what does that mean? It means that the people of Gaza do not trust the governing ability of Hamas, but Haniyeh continues to be a popular figure. Ever since Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, Hamas has taken up the role of the de facto authority here. Over the years, they've purged political opposition. The Gaza Strip has remained under their strict control. Hamas has maintained its popularity with social service and the call to raise militias against Israel. But this time, they may have gone too far. They've launched an all-out military operation against Israel. Will this spell the end of Hamas? We'll be tracking this story for you. The other big question is, what impact will this war have on the Saudi-Israel peace deal? Was this Hamas offensive aimed at derailing what was touted as the deal of the century? It was said to be precipitously close to being finalized. In recent months, a drumbeat has been built around this, around normalization of ties between these two countries, Saudi Arabia and Israel. The deal is being brokered by the United States of America. It would be a tectonic shift in the geopolitics of West Asia.
There's no question. The Abraham Accords heralded the dawn of a new age of peace. But I believe that we are at the cusp of an even more dramatic breakthrough, an historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia.
But here's the thing. It also carries major implications for other actors beyond the three stakeholders. And the one with the biggest stake here is Palestine. First, let's tell you what's in it for the principal players. The Saudis see this deal as a way to further their interest through the US. Because at the heart of this potential deal is what Riyadh wants from Washington. Saudi Arabia wants a military pact with the US. It would require Washington to defend the kingdom in return for opening ties with Israel. Defend against whom, you ask? Mainly Iran. Saudi Arabia and Iran have been at odds for decades. Well, this year, diplomatic relations between the two resumed after a 7-year break, but the power tussle between Riyadh and Tehran remains. Iran's large missile arsenal is another big worry for the Saudis. In 2022, the deal was first discussed between Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and US President Joe Biden. Initially, Riyadh wanted ironclad NATO-style defense guarantees, but that's not happening. And so the Saudis have since conceded that the final pact may fall short of that. Riyadh also wants American support for a civilian nuclear program. So they have a full list. What about the US? What does the US stand to gain? What's in it for them? By bringing two longtime foes together, it would be a big win for Joe Biden. Also perfect timing, because the US election is around the corner. And Biden needs a foreign policy win. This could be it. What about Israel? Why would Israel want this? Saudi Arabia is the richest and the most powerful Arab state, the de facto leader of the Muslim world. If Saudi Arabia recognizes Israel, it would counter the view that the presence of a Jewish state in the mostly Muslim region is illegitimate. It would help open doors in other Muslim nations such as Malaysia and Indonesia. And just like Saudi Arabia, Israel too wants a defense pact with the US. They already have a very good relationship. The Netanyahu government was willing to make limited concessions to the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority governs the West Bank. But they lost power in Gaza to Hamas. Like I said, more than a decade ago, the Hamas took control of Gaza, and the Strip has been under the control of this Islamist group since. Coming back to the deal, it seemed to be a win-win situation for Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the US. But do you know who was the losing party? Palestine. Israel has been looking to limit the scope of concessions it gives on Palestine. There's pressure on Biden to push Israel further to advance the two-state solution. But this has been a sticking point because Israel's government is ideologically opposed to Palestinian statehood, the current government. Here's an example of the resistance. The Haaretz is an Israeli newspaper. It reported that one of Netanyahu's aides referred to Mahmoud Abbas as quote-unquote the mayor of Ramallah. Mahmoud Abbas is the president of the Palestinian Authority. The Israeli official reportedly said the mayor of Ramallah will not determine the details of the deal. And it appears that Saudi Arabia agreed. Reports say Riyadh would not hold up the deal, even for the Palestinians, even if Israel did not offer any major concessions on statehood for Palestine. So the Palestinian cause was being put on the back burner. It has been on the back burner for a while now. It's time the world accepted it. And this could be why Hamas launched this offensive. One, Israel's attention will be diverted to this war, and two, it complicates the situation for Saudi Arabia now. By all accounts, the Israeli counteroffensive will be ruthless. Riyadh has called for quote-unquote immediate de-escalation between Palestinians and Israelis. Realistically, there is no chance of that. But then again, Hamas hasn't really ever needed a reason to attack Israel. Its rocket launches against Israel are almost a daily affair. But today, they took all of it a step further by invading Israeli territory. And there's also another player in this puzzle of West Asian politics, that is Iran, a country which backs and funds the Hamas, as we just told you. In the aftermath of the attack on Israel, while almost all countries condemned it, guess who did not? Iran. An advisor to its supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has said that Tehran supported this attack. He even went on to congratulate the fighters. He called them fighters. And this provocation also gives rise to speculation that Israel could attack Iran. There's a lot of reports doing the rounds. There's a lot of speculation as well. How far is Israel prepared to go? Will they just limit themselves to the Gaza Strip? Will they also take this attack to Iran? For decades, Israel has considered Iran as its number one enemy. Israel has fought Iranian proxies on its borders. The 34-day war with Hezbollah in Lebanon was fought in 2006. And since the 1990s, Israel has been battling with Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. In May this year, Netanyahu said 95% of Israel's security problems come from Iran. So Israel attacking Iran is a very real possibility. And amidst all this warmongering, where does the Saudi-Israel peace deal stand? Certainly delayed, if not derailed. As the war clouds gather, it seems West Asia's chance at peace has been put on hold again. Meanwhile, for the people of Israel, this day was a nightmare. I spoke to some friends there. They were in bunkers with their families. Some reported strikes near their homes. They seemed unflappable amid reports of death. It's hard to process it if you don't know Israel's story. These are people who've always been surrounded by hostile forces. They've fought many wars. They have bomb shelters in each house. And they have attack alerts on their phones. One moment you're having ice cream, the next moment you're running for cover. Security is a central feature of life in Israel, and they have no choice. It's one of the most militarized countries in the world. They have something called an Iron Dome. It's a missile defense system that repels attacks. Our next report tells you all about Israel's defense shield.
It was just another Saturday morning in Israel. What followed was absolute carnage. A barrage of rockets filled the skies, anywhere between 5,000 to 7,000. It's been called the deadliest attack on Israel in years. Tel Aviv wasted little time. For starters, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a very clear message for his country.
אנחנו במלחמה.
We are at war. And by now, you know what that means. Tel Aviv swung into action. It mobilized its fighter jets, conducted airstrikes in Gaza, and also reportedly intercepted some rockets that were coming its way at home. Sounds dramatic, right? But here's the thing about war. You wouldn't want to be caught napping when the enemy strikes. Instead, you would like to have the best possible weapon ready to strike back. Meet Israel's Iron Dome, an advanced all-weather air defense system that has served as the bedrock for Israel's defense. Its job? To intercept and destroy short-range rockets fired by the enemy mid-air. How many of these does Israel have? 10 Iron Dome batteries, with each battery consisting of 3 to 4 launchers, 20 missiles and a radar. And it's costly too. Each battery costs around $50 million. Reports say each interception costs upwards of $100,000. The Iron Dome may seem like compact, innocuous box-like systems, but they do pack a punch. The Iron Dome has been a part of Israel's arsenal for more than a decade. It was put in service in 2011. But what prompted for the Iron Dome to come into existence? Lebanon-based terror group Hezbollah targeting Israel. In 2006, nearly 44 Israelis died in rocket attacks, and millions were forced to be inside bomb shelters. Since 2011, the goal of the Iron Dome is clear: destroy rockets fired from Gaza. It's designed to intercept and destroy rockets fired from a distance of 4 to 70 kilometers. The Iron Dome system is mobile too, so they can be moved easily to wherever needed. It has 3 components. The first, a radar. It detects an incoming rocket. Then it relays information about the rocket to the battery's control center. Then the control center calculates if the rocket will hit populated areas. If not, the enemy's rocket is allowed to land as is. If yes, a missile is fired from the launcher. And what happens next? The sky looks something like this. But how successful is this system? Israeli military officials say the Iron Dome's accuracy is as high as 96%. So in theory, it's supposed to secure Israelis on ground by taking down these rockets mid-air. But here's the flip side. No weapon comes with a 100% guarantee. Case in point, what happened today. Despite Israel's shield swinging into action, the scale of the damage was there for everyone to see. Back to the Iron Dome. For Israel, this is like a shield. For Israelis, it's something that they're used to seeing around them. Why? It's because of how often it's been used. Israel has mostly deployed the Iron Dome to tackle attacks from Gaza. Since 2011, it claims to have intercepted 2,400 rockets just using the Iron Dome. So anytime rockets from Gaza are fired, the Israelis know what's coming next.
We are pretty much used to it. This is the way we live here for more than a decade. Each time there is tension, we are already in the mode that we expect to get things changing here. That means we are not going to sleep normally at night. Probably we are going to have a lot of rockets coming in. It's a good thing to have the Iron Dome that protects us from all these terrorist intentions to disrupt our lives.
The Iron Dome seems to be Mr. Dependable for Israel, and Netanyahu would hope that remains the case going forward, given the current escalation. Tel Aviv would want its shield to be... Given the current escalation, Tel Aviv would want its shield to be at its best.
They say those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Is that the case with Israel today? The strikes on the country were unprecedented and unexpected, but the timing is not an accident. It's the biggest attack that Israel has seen since the Yom Kippur War. That was 50 years ago. On October 6, 1973, Israel fought a war for its survival. And 50 years later, it is fighting another one. The Yom Kippur War is known by many names: the October War, the Fourth Arab-Israeli War. But what led to this conflict? In 1967, Israel launched attacks on Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. It resulted in Israeli occupation of Palestine, also Golan Heights in Syria, and the Egyptian Sinai Desert. 6 years later, in 1973, Egypt and Syria launched a two-front attack. They attacked Israel from two sides, Egypt and Syria. Their mission, to regain their lost territory. So that's how the Yom Kippur War started. At first, Israel was caught unprepared. They thought their defense was impenetrable. But when Egyptian and Syrian forces launched an attack, Israel was brought down in just 3 hours. It left them shocked. This country was celebrating the festival of Yom Kippur. It's the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. An attack in the middle of that celebration was unimaginable to them. They never expected anything like this. Plus, many soldiers were on leave. So the initial losses were heavy. Israel faced a lot of setback, but they hit back, and it turned the tide in their favor in this war. In the end, the Yom Kippur War ended in a stalemate. Israel and Egypt signed a ceasefire. And while Israelis did not lose the war, they were left in shock. They could not believe that their country had been left exposed, especially in the face of such a brazen attack. Plus, there were those who fought the war. We know many of them today as Israel's leaders, like Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He fought in that war, and Labour Party Premier Ehud Barak. So this war changed Israel. It changed its people and its leaders. It also raised many questions. The first is about the intelligence failure. How did it happen? How did Israel not anticipate this? How did so many soldiers die? There was public uproar. There were multiple investigations. And in the end, then Prime Minister Golda Meir had to resign. The people of Israel blamed her for the conflict. At least the politicians did. She had to step down. 50 years on, Israel faces a similar question. How did they not see this coming? Hamas has tried a lot of things before. Rockets, suicide bombs, even incendiary kites. But nothing they have done has ever been this brazen. It's rare for Israel to lose control of its towns. It's even more rare for it to not see it coming. After all, this is a nation with the most sophisticated and extensive intelligence network in the whole of West Asia, among the best in the world. Its surveillance system is among the most advanced in the world. Yet, at the end of a Jewish holiday, they were caught asleep at the wheel, just like they were caught asleep in 1973, 50 years ago. Israel's famed security apparatus failed then, and it looks like it has failed again. So what was it this time? Was it overconfidence? In 1973, Israel never thought Egypt and Syria would attack them. They thought the 1967 war was enough to deter them. Reports suggest this time was no different. We'll be tracking the Israel story. The latest reports that we have say that US President Joe Biden has cleared $8 billion rather, in military aid for Israel. So the Americans are walking the talk. They're giving Israel the support that they think it needs. Like I said, we'll be tracking what happens. And with this, it's a wrap on this special edition of Vantage. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be keeping track of updates from Israel and around the world. So make sure you stay with us.
All right, Colonel Jonathan Connicus, who is the former IDF spokesperson, joins me right now. Many thanks to you, Colonel, for joining in. Thousands of rockets have been fired from Gaza. Palestinian fighters have captured Israeli soldiers, even civilians. They've crossed into Israel from the Gaza Strip. It's an unprecedented situation for Israel, something Israel's not experienced in decades. How do you weigh in on reports that this is a massive intelligence failure?
Well, hello, and thank you for having me. This is a very sad day in Israel and quite of a watershed moment. You're very correct in your analysis and your description of the situation. There's reality up until October 7th, and then there's reality after October 7th. For sure, there are many difficult questions that will be asked by Israeli civilians in communities around the Gaza Strip that the IDF, the government, the Internal Security Agency, the Israeli police will have to answer, and there will be consequences. The attack is unprecedented. The cruelty of the terrorists who infiltrated into Israel and massacred, executed Israeli civilians, women, elderly, and even children have been executed at point blank by jihadi Palestinian terrorists in their homes is unprecedented in terms of its scope. and so will also be the Israeli response. And an Israeli general said, and I think he said it very aptly, that Hamas has opened the floodgates of hell upon Gaza, and Hamas will bear the responsibility. And I hope that these are not words only used for bluster and for media, and I sincerely hope that the leaders of Hamas and all of their senior operatives will not see the light of day, and that Israel will take this opportunity to improve the security reality along our borders and not allow any other terrorist to embed themselves at our doorstep and repeat such an attack ever in the future.
Right, definitely, Dr. Usha. And how do you think this is going to change the entire sports sector scenario in our country?
Yeah. I think the encourage they are getting now, that helps them because they are being honored by everyone in the country.
Right, Dr. Usha. Thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18. Our next caller is Aisha from Delhi. Aisha, thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18. What's your message?
Honestly, I'm just pretty excited about the fact that we've been able to get 100 games, 100 medals at the Asian Games. It's a very historic moment for India at this point. I think we'd also like to congratulate everybody, every Indian athlete who is there, who's participating in the games, the different events, because all of them are also going after practicing so much and for so long. To even get 100 medals at this point, we're only going to continue to cross the medal tally past this. So I think it's a really exciting moment for India. And we just need to say congratulations to everybody at this point.
And as I asked Dr. Usha also, Aisha, would you like to share your thoughts on how this achievement is going to, change the scenario of sports sector for our country?
So specifically, I'm not entirely sure how it'll change it, but I think what it's going to do overall is it's going to boost the morale of anybody who's looking to participate in the games in the future. This is going to boost the morale of sports people, of those who are currently training and not yet at the games. So I think that's the way it's going to change it. We might see more investment, but we're just going to have to wait to see how this develops in the future.
Right, Asha. Thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18, and we would like to request our viewers to call us on 01206403751 and pour in your congratulatory messages for your athletes who have made this nation proud. India has hit a century in the Asian Games, with the 100th medal being a gold medal. The 100th was clinched by the women's kabaddi team after beating Chinese Taipei by 26-24 in a thrilling final. This is the first time that India has breached the triple figure mark. India's medal tally now stands at 25 gold, 35 silver and 40 bronze medals. We have some reactions coming in on the same. Let's take a look at them.
खुशी बहुत ज़्यादा है क्योंकि ये हमारा टारगेट था और यही एक एम रखे आए थे कि यहाँ से डायरेक्ट क्वालिफाई करेंगे और गोल्ड मेडल जीत के जाएंगे। और ओवरऑल पूरे टूर्नामेंट की बात करूँ तो टीम का परफॉर्मेंस जो है काफ़ी अच्छा रहा है। एंड आज के मैच की बात करूँ तो एज ए टीम हमने डिफेंस बहुत अच्छा किया है, आज स्कोर भी किए हैं, बट आई थिंक उनको बहुत कम मौके दिए हैं कि वो हमारे टीम में आके और गोल कर सकें।
India has hit a century in the Asian Games, with the 100th medal being bagged as a gold medal. The 100th was clinched by the women's kabaddi team after beating Chinese Taipei by 26-24 in the thrilling final match. This is the first time that India has breached the triple figure mark. India's medal tally now stands at 25 gold medals, 35 silver medals and 40 bronze medals in the bag. Shooting and athletics are two events that have brought glory to the sports sector of our country and has increased the medal tally for India this year as well. Prime Minister Narendra Modi lauded the kabaddi women's team, saying that their victory is a testament to the indomitable spirit of our women athletes. The Prime Minister also congratulated our phenomenal athletes whose efforts have led to the historic milestone for our country. Now, CNN News 18's Kuhina Sharma also spoke exclusively with former Sports Minister Kiran Rijiju about India's historic feat at the Asian Games. Listen into that conversation. All right, change in plans. We have CNN News 18's Shivani Gupta joining us on the phone line. Shivani, a very good morning to you. Earlier, we were talking about the assured numbers of medal India is going to bag for themselves. Could you repeat that for our viewers?
So the big update, of course, on the penultimate day of the competition is that India has secured 100 medals for the first time. The first time India has entered triple digits as far as the medals tally at the Asian Games is concerned. And of course, this was widely expected yesterday itself, given some of the competitions that were going to take place today. In archery, we have won more golds today. We have also won the women's kabaddi gold today. There is, of course, cricket